The first wall Harrison Min Tran ran into at Nexinova's headquarters wasn't made of bricks, nor was it policy, nor even security. It was the wall of stairs, a silent glance from a receptionist as she saw him walk in. Light gray shirt, clean shoes, and a face that didn't clearly belong to any of the diversity groups the company so proudly advertised. She didn't say a word, just glanced at him and nodded mechanically. Min nodded back politely, as though he were just another applicant arriving on time. But inside his jacket pocket, an old library card rested quietly, next to the pulse of patience itself. The card was worn, its plastic edges slightly peeling. The ink on the name almost faded. Tran Ngok Lan, Garden Grove Public Library. His mother used it religiously during their first 7 years in the U.S., borrowing ESL books, pronunciation tapes, and sometimes even children's comics just to practice reading. Min had sat beside her in their cramped kitchen, listening as she mumbled each line again and again. "Where is the restroom? Do you have soy sauce?" Her voice shook, not from the cold, but from the fear of getting it wrong. Fear of being laughed at, misunderstood, of being a bother. He never forgot. The main lobby of Nexinova gleamed with high-tech lighting, sleek, modern, and emotionally sterile. Opposite the reception desk was a massive glass wall, the wall of visionaries, where the portraits of founders, executives, and the company's so-called revolutionary minds were displayed like a modern-day shrine. Min glanced at it. 72 faces, 12 rows, 6 columns. None looked like him. Not a single pair of Asian eyes. Not one name that suggested anything but all-American heritage. As if, to belong here, you first had to pronounce your own name in a way others could say more easily. The receptionist checked her list, then pointed toward the elevator. "Internship interview? 3rd floor, room 3B, no smile. No, how can I help you?" No interest. Min stepped into the elevator, his reflection cast on the cold steel walls. He exhaled slowly and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Today he wasn't arriving as a CEO. Today he was Min Truong, a computer science graduate with a machine learning certificate from MIT, some freelance experience with 3 startups, but no formal job history with big corporations. That was the profile he'd submitted under the name Min Truong. No edits, no AI voice filters, and that very profile had been rejected after the initial interview round. But he came back, not to correct a mistake, but to confirm something, that this system didn't need to scream its bias in your face. All it had to do was overlook you, politely, subtly, by the book. The door to room 3B opened. Inside were a blond man, around 40, and an Asian woman in a black blazer, younger. They didn't offer him a seat, just looked at him. The woman spoke first, her voice sharp in that polished MBA tone. "Hi, Min. Could you introduce yourself in 1 minute? In English. Clearly. Avoid technical terms unless necessary." He nodded. "My name is Min Truong, and I recently—" The man raised his hand. "Could you repeat that?" The initial consonant wasn't quite clear. Min paused, adjusted, and started again. His voice was low, deliberate, with the slightest nasal undertone. Not native, but completely understandable. He didn't apologize, didn't hide it. He knew full well, if you had to apologize for your accent, then this wasn't an interview. It was a judgment on identity. The woman nodded and jotted something down. Halfway through, the man cut in. "I think you have good skills, but frankly, we're looking for someone who can speak more naturally with corporate clients. Standard American accent." He looked Min dead in the eyes like he had just laid down an unspoken rule. The woman added, "Some clients have shared that strong accents can be distracting. Even with great technical ability, user experience is our top priority." No one called it discrimination. They called it a cultural fit. The interview ended at the 11-minute mark. No good luck wishes. No, thank you for coming. Min walked out, down a carpeted hallway of muffled silence, and returned to the main lobby. The portrait wall still stood there. Lights still glared on names like Connor Slate, Martin Gale, Evelyn Park, none of whom had to practice "where is" 10 times a night just to feel confident asking for directions. He stared at the photo in the 3rd row, the current CEO, then turned away quietly. As he crossed the lobby, someone called out, "Mr. Tran?" But he didn't stop, because today he wasn't Mr. Tran. Today he was Min, the one who'd been rejected for sounding not quite right. 3 hours later, in a cafe 2 blocks from headquarters, Harrison Min Tran opened his laptop. On screen was a new application. Name, Eric Wang. Same credentials, but with an intro video filtered through internal voice software. He clicked submit, and 12 minutes later, the interview invitation came through. No questions asked. By then, the sun had started to set, but something inside Min had lit up, not for revenge, but to shine a light on a blind spot the whole system was avoiding. A second identity had just been born. But this time, he wasn't entering to be accepted. He was entering to see if a name that sounded right and a voice smoother around the edges really made the doors open that much easier. And if they did, he would walk through, not to belong, but to witness from the inside those still left standing on the outside. The application under the name Eric Wang wasn't a prank. It was a litmus test, a drop of dye into the system's bloodstream to see how the hidden current would change color. Min hadn't altered a single detail about his qualifications, skills, or experience. There were only two differences: a name that was easier to pronounce and a self-introduction video with audio processed by software he had built himself. No trace remained of the gentle, slightly nasal timbre in his real voice. No more Min, no more tonal marks, just a smoother voice, exactly the kind the company had implicitly asked for during the initial interview. It took less than 15 minutes to receive a reply email. "Congratulations, Eric. We're pleased to invite you to our onboarding program." No second screening, no follow-up questions, just a better-sounding name and a voice no one had to ask to repeat. The door opened, so smoothly it was terrifying. A few days later, Min returned to the main lobby of Nexanova, the same place that had rejected him for sounding unfamiliar. His hair trimmed, wearing black-rimmed glasses, and his old student ID replaced with a badge that read, Eric Wang, intern cohort B7. This time the receptionist greeted him with a smile. "Mr. Wang, welcome. Coffee or tea while you wait?" No scrutiny, no long silence, just acceptance. Cold, seamless, and perhaps all the more chilling because of it. Min joined the onboarding area with the other interns, most of them young, energetic, from top-tier schools and predominantly white. The orientation was led by a mid-level manager named Hannah, young, high-pitched voice, energetic, fond of words like super exciting and "you guys are rock stars." Yet she asked no one about their background. When it was Min's turn to introduce himself, he kept it brief. "Hi, I'm Eric Wang. I recently graduated from MIT, focusing on machine learning. Excited to be here?" He spoke in the AI-filtered voice, so smooth it even sounded foreign to his own ears. And in the eyes of the others, there was something immediately palatable, like his name had just entered the correct password into an invisible admission system. His assigned workspace was on the 6th floor, R&D department, among several veteran engineers and someone he had noticed before. Jenny Wu, a young, quiet engineer, often coding late, always left out of the spotlight. She didn't recognize him. Or maybe she did, but said nothing. They sat 2 rows apart, close enough for Min to observe her communication style. Brief, precise, never chiming in on the animated banter of their louder colleagues. Connor Slate, the department lead, showed up Tuesday morning. He didn't seem to recognize Min from the initial interview, perhaps because Min hadn't made a memorable impression, as those who don't belong often leave nothing behind but a hard-to-pronounce name. Connor got straight to the point, skipping over education and background. "Eric, you'll be assisting with product testing and QA. You'll shadow our deployment team for the first sprint. Keep your commits clean. If you're good, we'll give you more." With that, he walked off without asking a single follow-up question. Min smiled faintly. This time, he didn't need to fight for attention. He already had it, though not as himself. He used his invisibility as an advantage. Listening, remembering, collecting. Within 2 weeks, he had documented more than a dozen instances of quiet discrimination. A black intern told to be more concise, even though he'd spoken half the time others did. An Indian engineer asked by a manager to double-check grammar before sending emails. and a Filipino employee misnamed 3 times in a single meeting. No one responded. No one followed up. The system seemed programmed to ignore what was inconvenient to address. On Thursday night, with the office dim and the only sounds being the soft hum of desk lamps and server fans, Min walked to Jenny's desk and gently placed a cold soda can next to her trackpad. She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. He smiled. "I saw your code for the recommender module. It's brilliant." She paused, then nodded. "Thanks, but they won't use it. Connor says it's too technical to explain to stakeholders." Min sat in the chair beside her. For the first time, he let his real voice come through, unfiltered, unmasked. "I've heard that before, a few times." Jenny looked at him for a long while. Then softly she asked, "You're not really Eric, are you?" He said nothing. Didn't confirm, didn't deny. She looked away and chuckled quietly. "I figured when you said debug station with the flat D. My dad does the same." In that moment, they both understood. In a system where voice defines value, hearing someone speak in their real voice was a rare act of trust. And in that cold room, trust was the most luxurious currency. Min told her the story of his first interview, how he had been judged as not suitable solely because of his voice, and how the system responded completely differently when he reapplied under another name. Jenny wasn't surprised. She simply said, "That's why I stopped correcting people when they mispronounce my name. Wu is simple, but they still say woo or who. Maybe it's easier if I don't exist clearly." That line made him pause, not because it was bitter, but because it was familiar. His mother had said the exact same thing after being misnamed by customers at the nail salon for 3 straight years. They don't want to get it right, because getting it right makes them feel guilty. That night, Min recorded a short voice note in his personal log. "Not everyone stays silent because they're weak. Some stay silent because the system never stops long enough to listen." And in that very moment, he knew. His second identity, Eric Wang, wasn't just a disguise. It was a mirror. Any reaction it provoked was a direct reflection of how the system viewed voice, skin, and difference. And once he had gathered enough data, the truth wouldn't need to shout to be heard. It would only need to be released at the right moment. On the third Tuesday of the third week, Min walked into the cafeteria alongside the other interns, and not a single person noticed his presence. That wasn't new. Being Eric Wang came with a strange advantage. You were welcomed just politely enough not to feel excluded, but ignored just enough not to be seen as a threat. He picked a simple lunch, brown rice, grilled salmon, steamed vegetables, then headed to a round table near the window. It sat slightly away from the buzzing groups where laughter came in bursts. Min sat alone, opened his tablet, eating while reviewing notes from the morning meeting, where Connor had spent 20 minutes explaining an AI function Jenny had written, but credited as a collaborative core team effort. No one objected. Jenny said nothing, and Min didn't speak up either. Not yet. Halfway through the final paragraph, he caught voices from a group of mid-level employees 2 tables over. One of them was Nate, the UI engineer who had once greeted Min with, "Glad your accent's not hard to follow." His voice now carried the rising tone of someone cracking a joke. "Did y'all notice that new intern, the quiet one with the 90s hair part? Looks like he walked out of some old Korean drama." A female voice cut in. "Eric something, right?" Nate replied, "Yeah, Eric Wang, or Wang, or Wong, or whatever. I don't even know. I asked him about the test module the other day, and I swear I thought I was listening to a dubbed Chinese voiceover." Laughter erupted. Another chimed in. "His voice sounds like Google Translate got caught in a storm. I swear I had to turn on live captions just to catch half of what he said." The table burst out again. Min kept eating. The grilled salmon had gone a little cold, but he didn't stop. On his left wrist, his custom smartwatch had already triggered recording mode. He didn't look up, just picked up more vegetables, enough to mask the slight clench in his jaw. Someone in the group, he didn't catch the name, added, "I heard he graduated from MIT. Probably remote, though." "Remote from Beijing?" "No, from Google Translate campus." The laughter this time was louder, more animated, and hollower than anything Min had heard in the past 3 weeks. Still, he didn't react. Not because he wasn't angry, but because he knew. One frown, one rebuttal, one sharp glare, and he'd shift instantly from Eric back to Min. And at that point, they wouldn't see someone being mocked. They'd see someone overreacting to a joke. Prejudice doesn't fear shouting. It fears evidence. 12 minutes later, Min left the cafeteria. Not because he was full, but because he'd had enough. Enough to add another entry to the log. The recording file was encrypted and stored under the title, Incident Number 08 Canteen Laughter. He typed the note, accent-based discrimination plus cultural mockery plus implied foreignness. No reaction. Spread level. 3 direct participants, 5 laughing along, 0 intervened. That afternoon, during the engineering team's sprint review meeting, Min stayed quiet. Connor went on at length about how the team had improved performance by 17% thanks to core team alignment. Jenny remained still. The slide displayed the code she had written, but the commit name read Henry, a white senior developer and Connor's close friend. No one said a word. After the meeting, Jenny silently packed up her laptop. Min walked by and placed a small slip of paper on her desk. Saw the last comment. Nice slide. Wrong name. Jenny didn't look at him, but when she picked up the paper, her eyes paused for half a second. Not angry, not sad. Just the look of someone long accustomed to seeing their work become proof of someone else's competence. That evening, Min stayed behind. The office lights were off. Only he remained, lit faintly by the glow of the server monitors. He opened Voice Mirror, an internal software he had once created to train AI in recognizing emotional tones in human voices. This time, he used it to tag the emotional profiles of recorded conversations. The canteen clip was labeled Mockery, Dismissive, Cultural Suppression. The emotional highlight wasn't the insults, but the extended, unbroken laughter, as if the mere existence of a different-sounding voice was a natural punchline. Late at night, Jenny messaged him on Slack. Eric, have they ever mispronounced your name? He replied 2 minutes later. Not wrong, but they used the right name to get me wrong. She sent a smiling face emoji. Nothing more. That night, Min looked at the photo taped to the back of his laptop. His mother in 1998 standing in front of Garden Grove Library, holding a pronunciation workbook titled Say It Right. He remembered exactly how she once told him about the day a customer made fun of her for mispronouncing the word receipt. She laughed along with them, then came home and cried in the bathroom. He had once asked, Mom, why didn't you correct them? She only said, because correcting someone doesn't teach them, son. It just makes them better at dodging you. Min thought, maybe that's why mockery never dies. It only changes outfits. And today it was wearing business casual, holding a laptop, and eating grilled salmon in the open concept cafeteria of a billion-dollar tech company. Starting in the 4th week, Nexinova's AI recommendation system began to show minor bugs. Nothing obvious but recurring. Every time a customer selected product A, the system would push out a suggestion for product B that was completely unrelated. At first, Connor assumed it was just a classification hiccup in the input data, but when the bug showed up across 3 consecutive demos, he started to panic. Jenny was the first to find the cause. An old logic function in the user feedback module had been overwritten during the latest update. Someone had failed to update the contextual condition, causing the system to prioritize outdated data relationships. She emailed Connor, attaching her diagnosis and a proposed fix. No one replied. Min read Jenny's analysis that same afternoon. It took him 12 minutes to understand the root issue, and another 2 hours to fully rewrite the faulty section, restructuring the AI logic to be context-driven instead of condition-based. He didn't tell anyone, didn't ask permission. He just committed the fix to a parallel system, ran an independent simulation. Results: accuracy improved by 18%, response time decreased by 0.8 seconds, and the entire test dataset returned 0 faulty suggestions. He saved the revision under a shadow account, no identifying name attached. The next morning, Connor called an emergency meeting. The entire team gathered in the glass conference room at the end of the 6th-floor hallway. I've got good news, he began, barely hiding his excitement. Last night, I reworked the logic of the recommendation system. We've just boosted performance by nearly 20%. He turned to the board, projecting the results. Min immediately recognized it as his own file. The account name had been swapped to Core Dev Connor Beta. Min said nothing, didn't turn his head, didn't ask, didn't smile. Jenny glanced at Min. She knew, not because there was hard evidence, but because in this team, only one person had the full understanding of the system to rewrite that section in 2 hours. And that person wasn't Connor. The meeting ended in a round of applause. Connor clapped Henry on the back, his senior developer buddy, then turned to the team and said, "This is a big win. I'll be presenting this optimization to the product team this afternoon. If it checks out, it'll become the core update for the quarter." Min stood up, took his laptop, didn't look at anyone, didn't say a word. At noon, he didn't go to the cafeteria. He stayed at his desk, opened Voice Mirror, and logged Incident number 11, work stolen. Not just plagiarism, erasure of authorship. Systemic behavior, not personal, Jenny knows. But she's silent, I'm silent too. But not for long. That afternoon, Connor presented the update to the product executive board. He added a slide with a casual footnote. "This optimization was implemented during my late-night test run. Sometimes ideas come at midnight." The room chuckled. Someone asked, "So who coded it?" He replied without blinking, "I built the core." Some bits came from the team. I don't remember who. The answer was light as air, but within it, a truth choked silent. Jenny returned to the office at 5:12 p.m. Min was still at his desk, typing code as if nothing had happened. She placed a folded piece of paper on his desk, said nothing, and walked away. He opened it. A single line. "I wrote 3 modules used in last year's demo. None of them had my name on it." Min folded the paper carefully, slid it into the laptop sleeve beside his mother's photo. Didn't say a word. But in his mind, he knew. Jenny's silence wasn't surrender. It was a form of encryption, waiting for the right person to decode. That night, Min did something he hadn't done in his 3 weeks at Nexanova. He read aloud the entire section of code Connor had just presented, using his real voice, line by line. He recorded it, embedded it into a simulation model for voice-based AI parsing. The system responded, tone, clear, confidence, high, clarity, acceptable. He smiled faintly. 4 weeks ago, that same voice had been deemed a barrier to client experience. He saved the file into a private folder labeled Truth Vault. Inside were everything they had never seen, the rewritten code submitted by someone without permission to push to main, the auto-debug module he built under someone else's name, the cafeteria audio with mocking laughter over his voice, and now the major optimization slide that Connor had blatantly stolen. He knew no one could refute this with words, but the truth, arranged with enough logic, would speak for itself. The next day at the full engineering team meeting, Connor announced that the team had been selected to present the demo to the investor council next week. He handed out assignments. Min's name wasn't on the list. Neither was Jenny's. Only those who were easy to understand, good presenters, and comfortable interfacing with stakeholders. Min smiled, not out of sadness, but because everything was happening exactly as he'd predicted. They didn't just steal your work. They sanitized your existence from the outcome, like you had never been part of it at all. But this time, he wouldn't let that existence disappear. He sent an email. No double C, no accusations. Just one line sent to the internal legal team. Attached is a log of contributions made by intern ID B7, Eric Wang, that are currently being presented under other names, for internal auditing only. The file was titled, "They never saw the code, but they used it." 3 hours passed, no reply. But he saw Connor walk out of a meeting room with a senior HR officer, face tense, no words. But for the first time, his steps didn't feel so firm. At the end of the day, Jenny came by his desk and asked, "What did you just do?" Min replied, "Nothing. Just returning a bit of memory to the system." She said nothing else. But before leaving, she left another slip of paper. This time it read, "I think you should have let your real voice speak earlier." Toward the end of the day, an internal email was sent out to all staff in the engineering department from HR. Reminder, attribution matters. Please ensure contributions are accurately documented in all reports and presentations. Compliance audits are ongoing. No names were mentioned. No blame assigned. But the room suddenly felt heavier. Connor passed by Min's desk at 5:37 p.m. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. His eyes skimmed over Min's screen, as if looking for a sign. But Min just kept typing, looking like any intern caught up in a debug loop. Jenny sat farther back. She saw it all. No words needed. She just opened Slack and sent him one line. "I guess this is only the beginning?" He replied after 2 minutes. "They want the code without the coder. I'm just reminding them. No one can erase someone by refusing to say their name." That night, as he exited the building, he didn't look up at the portrait wall. He knew full well his name might not be there yet, but his code was running across their systems. The nameless lines, still working, still correcting logic flagged by others in the wrong places. And if one day the truth needed to speak, those lines of code would be its first witness. The evening breeze blew gently. He slid his hands into his pockets. The old library card was still there, worn but intact. And for the first time in years, he heard his mother's voice in his head. Not when she feared getting the words wrong, but when she finally got a sentence right and turned to him with a quiet smile. "See, son? You don't need perfect pronunciation. You just need someone to listen long enough." Min smiled. This time it wasn't to hide anything. It was a quiet affirmation. Nexinova's internal software had a hidden function that few people used. Request Private Sync Room, a feature allowing 2 employees to open a conversation channel with no logs, no monitoring, and no saved transcript. It came with just 3 conditions. It couldn't last more than 30 minutes, no more than 2 participants, and both had to confirm. It was a feature Min had proposed 2 years ago under the justification of creating space to resolve internal conflict before escalating to HR. Now he was using it himself. 9:04 p.m., room 004, sub-level D, the old tech wing. Dim lighting, an old wooden table, a glass door covered in frosted decal to block outside view. Min sat ready, laptop in logging lock mode. The door opened. Jenny stepped in, holding a folder, saying nothing. Once the door closed, the room grew quiet enough to hear the light hum of wires vibrating behind the outlet from the air conditioning. He nodded. She sat down. She didn't open the folder right away, but looked directly at him. "I don't know who you are, but I know one thing. You're not like the others here. Not just because of how you write code, but because of how you let others steal it without reacting." He gave a faint smile. Sometimes silence is the fastest way to let them reveal who they really are. Jenny frowned. "And you think letting Connor parade that entire body of work on a slide deck is revealing who he is?" Min didn't reply. He placed a small USB drive on the table. Voice mirror logs, 12 incidents, full recordings, including the cafeteria. Jenny touched the USB lightly, didn't pick it up. She asked, "You recorded everything?" He nodded. "Not to harm anyone, just to make sure they couldn't keep harming others without leaving a trace." She opened the folder. Inside were old Comet logs showing the usernames that pushed code into the system, all white engineers. But in each module's internal comments, the original tag read, JWUAI Dev, Jenny Wu. She slid the folder toward him. "These 3 updates are mine, but my name has never been mentioned in any official report." Min took the pages, flipped through them, then looked up. "Do you want your name back?" Jenny was silent, then after a pause softly said, "Not to reclaim it, just to prove I was here." In that moment, time seemed to slow. No further confirmation was needed. The collaboration had begun, not through contracts, but through something both had lost before. Voice. Min handed Jenny a plan, not a takedown strategy, not a complaint, but a project to reconstruct technical authorship, a process in which every line of code would be assigned a hidden ID, then cross-referenced with system logs to restore the original author behind each contribution. Jenny read for a long while, then quietly said, "If you bring this to HR, they'll ignore it. But if this goes before the National Technical Review Board, then..." She didn't finish the sentence. Min nodded. "Exactly." I don't need them to fire anyone. I just need them to correct the name. Jenny exhaled. All right, I'll help. From the next day on, the two began what they called dark channel communication. They didn't speak in the office, didn't sit near each other in the cafeteria, didn't chat on Slack. But every Tuesday and Thursday night, when the office had cleared out, they'd meet in room 004, logging into the Ghost server, a platform Min had set up long ago for voice AI testing. There they began to recover every erased trace, original comments, discarded debug logs, experimental modules never credited. Jenny handwrote the original annotations. Min rebuilt the author tagging AI framework, slow but steady. By the end of the fifth week, they had recovered 27 code segments with signs of misattributed authorship. Among them, 11 were Jenny's, 6 belonged to an Indian engineer who left last year, 4 came from a Mexican intern who was denied a full-time offer, and 3 were Min's, under the alias Eric Wang. Min looked at the names that had been wiped, and he understood. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about people who had never been heard long enough to be remembered. One late evening, Jenny asked him, "Who are you, really?" He was silent. After a moment, he simply answered, "Someone once told me my voice wasn't suitable for client-facing work. But that same voice once saved a customer during an emergency chatbot session I designed, and they never knew who I was." Jenny sat still. She didn't ask further. She just nodded. That night, Min recorded a personal log. Your voice is the first thing they hear, and the first thing they use to decide whether they'll keep listening. The next morning, Connor held a team-wide meeting. He announced a new project. Nexanova would present their latest AI model at the National Tech Summit with over 400 CEOs, engineers, and investors attending. "I'll be the lead presenter," he said, "and I want to bring someone who listens well but speaks little. Henry." Applause erupted. Jenny glanced at Min. No reaction, but in her eyes was a message. Everything we've gathered. It was for moments like this. And that moment was now closer than ever. As he pressed the elevator button to return to the 6th floor, the doors opened slowly, almost as if the mechanism itself was hesitating. No one was inside, but just as he stepped in, a woman's voice called out from the end of the hallway, "Hold the door, please!" He held the button. The elevator waited. The person who entered was Margaret Fields, Senior HR Director, a tall, composed black woman in her early 50s. She gave him a polite smile and nod. "Thanks, Eric." Min nodded back. He knew who she was, and she, perhaps, knew more than she let on. The elevator began its descent. Floor 12, then 11, 10. No one said anything, but by the time they reached the 9th floor, Margaret turned toward him, her voice soft but clear. "You're in engineering, right?" Min replied, "Yes, intern on the product team." She paused for a beat. "I read a strange commit last week, pushed under a shadow ID, clean logic, commented in English, but something about it felt like it wasn't written by a native speaker." Min stayed silent, neither confirming nor denying. Margaret continued, "I asked Connor who wrote it. He said it was Henry, but Henry doesn't write that way. He likes verbose blocks, doesn't use nested conditions." She turned fully toward him. "Do you know that code?" Min didn't flinch. He simply said, "I tested it, and it runs smooth." Margaret looked him in the eye. "I didn't ask who tested it. I asked who wrote it." Floor 8. The doors stayed shut. No one entered. The tension inside the elevator was thick like fog. Min stared straight at the floor display. Then quietly, without turning toward her, he asked, "If a piece of code saves the entire project, but the author is never mentioned, what should people ask first? Who wrote it, or why they were left out?" Margaret didn't respond immediately. She remained silent for a long moment. Then softly, "I was once the first person in this department who didn't speak with a perfect American accent. My voice made some people feel harsh. They used to call me HR with attitude. Back then I stayed quiet, but I never forgot who said it." She turned to him again, "And I've never forgotten those who were spoken about that way, and still stayed." Floor 7. A chime. No one got in. Margaret pulled a small card from her pocket. She placed it in Min's hand. "This is my personal number. not connected to the system, no logging. If you ever need someone to listen without interrupting, call. The door opened at floor 6. Min stepped out. He didn't look back. But he knew. The game was no longer just between him and Jenny. It was starting to touch the center of the system. That evening, Jenny entered room 004 as usual. But this time, Min placed the card in front of her. She read the name. Her eyes widened. Margaret? How did you? Min raised his hand. She doesn't know everything, but she's beginning to want to listen. Jenny sat down. So what do we tell her? Min replied, his voice low. Nothing yet. But next time, we won't speak with words. He opened his laptop and launched the demo of the new AI system, powered by the very code Connor had stolen. The interface ran seamlessly. Smart recommendations. The module label was clear. Voice Reclaim V1. Jenny read the technical description. I've never seen an AI module that identifies coders just from intonation and punctuation style. Min nodded. Because it didn't exist. Not until I learned how to read what no one signed their name on. 3 days later, Min dropped off a packet into the anonymous internal mailbox on the 12th floor. Inside was a technical breakdown detailing the system for identifying a coder through their unique syntax and expression patterns. No names were mentioned, but at the bottom a handwritten note read, "Sometimes the fingerprint isn't on the glass. It's in the syntax." Margaret received the packet at 7:42 a.m. She read for 40 minutes, said nothing. But later that day, HR sent out a department-wide notice. Starting next week, all internal presentations must include a contribution log signed by each author. That afternoon, Connor yelled at an assistant in the hallway, "Why the hell do we have to do this paperwork garbage?" The assistant replied, "Directive from HR." Connor walked past Jenny's desk, glanced at Min, and kept walking. For the first time, no one in the office spoke to him. That night, Min recorded in his personal journal, "The system doesn't collapse when you shout at it. It changes when someone inside stops pretending they can't hear." Friday of the 6th week, Connor sent out an urgent email. All engineers from the R&D team are to report to the main conference room at 3 p.m. Special presentation for visiting partners from strategic stakeholders. No further details, no slides attached, but the atmosphere in the office that morning had already shifted. Connor walked through the aisles like a general holding a newly won map. Jenny quietly settled into her station. Min continued finalizing the last segment of Voice Reclaim. Both of them understood. The silent war had now stepped into the light. At exactly 3 p.m., the 10th floor conference room was packed. VIP guest chairs were lined in 2 rows. Staff from multiple teams filled the remaining seats around 3 sides of the table. In that glass-walled room where everything reflected, Connor stood in the center like a TED Talk speaker, ready to close a $1 million deal. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice confident and firm. "Today I have the honor of presenting a breakthrough from our team, next-generation contextual recommendation technology developed internally by Nexinova under my leadership." The first slide appeared. Project title, Contextual Recall AI, Core Alpha V2. Below it, performance graphs, response speed, accuracy rates, and in the bottom left corner, the project lead, Connor Slate. No one else. No mention of any team. No credit to the actual coder. And notably, no trace of Eric Wang. Connor continued, "We've worked day and night, and I've personally guided this team through several complex iterations. For me, this isn't just technology, it's a declaration." He paused for effect, then smiled. "A declaration that Nexinova does not accept flaws. We fix them, and we make them better." Min sat in the 3rd row, expressionless. But beneath the table, his hand gripped a small USB drive, the only backup of the original commit data, audio logs, and personal documentation. Jenny sat beside him, her face tense like a tightened string. When Connor reached slide 5, detailing the core logic structure, Jenny stood up. The entire room froze. "Excuse me," she said, voice sharp and steady. "I need to clarify. The code on that slide was not written by Connor. I authored the core contextual engine. Min Truong optimized it. The person standing here merely renamed the file." The room went still in a vacuum of air. Connor scoffed. Jenny, I think you're getting emotional. This isn't the time to damage the company's image over semantics. Jenny didn't flinch. It's not emotion, it's fact. Commit history, edit logs, and system records all exist. A guest leaned over to whisper, "Is there evidence?" Connor pivoted. "I think we need to discuss information security." An intern, Eric Wang, used unauthorized tools to collect internal data. "I have already informed HR." Men looked him straight in the eye, unblinking. Connor continued, "And I would like to take this opportunity to suggest that Nexanova reevaluate the cultural fit of certain individuals on this team." He didn't say a name, but every gaze landed on Min. Margaret Fields, head of HR, sat at the end of the table. She had not spoken once until now, but she reached for the microphone. "Connor, if you're claiming an intern violated policy, then present the evidence. If not, we'll initiate a formal, impartial investigation. And my first instruction is, shut down this presentation." The room cracked open with stunned silence. Connor stepped back, visibly shaken. But he pressed on. "I'm only doing my job, and I don't believe we should allow individuals who haven't fully integrated to shift the direction of an already successful project." Margaret turned toward him. "Define integrated, Connor. Fluent pronunciation, or knowing when to stay silent?" At that moment, Jenny pulled out a folder. She handed it directly to Margaret. "System logs, verified by the testing team, the real author of the code." Margaret opened it, skimmed through, then looked directly at Connor. "I believe this meeting is over." Connor froze. Min stood. He said nothing. But as he reached the door, he stopped and turned back. For the first time, he spoke in his unfiltered voice. No AI modulation, no softened edges. "I don't need anyone to compliment my voice. I just want to be heard fully once, without being cut off." No one responded. Only silence remained, and glances that were finally beginning to shift. A day after the chaotic meeting, no one in the R&D team mentioned what had happened. Not a single email, not one Slack message. Connor didn't show up at the office that morning. Jenny continued working as usual, but she no longer hid her screen when Min walked by. Margaret requested that the entire engineering team resubmit their commit logs from the past 6 weeks. No one objected, but everyone sensed something had shifted. That afternoon, a group of guests from Delacroix Ventures, Nexanova's strategic partner, arrived to tour the San Mateo office. Margaret personally led them. Connor was still absent. The group passed through the R&D zone, the UI design wing, testing automation, before arriving at the Hall of Honor, where the Wall of Visionaries stood. The wall was still there, gleaming, silent. 72 portraits arranged by order of contribution, from Nexanova's early days as a garage startup in Fremont to its current standing as one of the most influential applied AI companies in the United States. One guest stopped at the third row, pointing to a small photo in the far left corner. "Oh, who's this? I didn't see him on the website." Margaret turned back. In a split second, she recognized something, then smiled softly. "One of our earliest Asian American founders. Rarely in the spotlight, but he laid the groundwork for Nexanova's language processing architecture. Still quietly working behind the scenes." A nearby engineer looked up, then widened his eyes. That photo, the man in a gray button-up, eyes sharp yet warm, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in technical notations, was Eric Wang. But that name was no longer there. Beneath the image, etched in silver, Harrison Min Tran, NLP architect and founding technologist, 2016 to present. The veins on the back of the engineer's neck tightened. One of the visiting guests noticed his reaction. Asked quietly, "You know him?" The engineer simply nodded. "I thought he was an intern." From the staircase on the upper level, Jenny stood still, watching everything. She didn't step into the room, just observed. That evening, when Min returned to the office, no one called him Eric anymore. A few avoided eye contact. Some gave an awkward nod. Henry, the one who once claimed Jenny's code as his own, walked over to Min's desk, as if to say something, but stopped himself. Min looked at him, not angry, not confrontational, just enough to make it clear. Silence was no longer a disguise. It was a choice. Jenny sent a single message. They know now. Min replied, knowing doesn't mean understanding, and understanding doesn't mean change. We're not done yet. Margaret called him into her office Monday morning. When he stepped in, she was facing the window. The room was gently lit, no one else present. She didn't invite him to sit. She simply asked, "Why did you come back?" He paused for a few seconds, then said, "Because I wanted to see if anyone had the patience to hear this voice all the way to the end of the sentence." She turned. "I listened." He nodded. "And they haven't." She placed a document on the desk. "Next week's board meeting. I want you to present the voice reclaim model, not as an intern, but as the original author." Min looked at the title, Internal Language Ethics Reform Proposal. She added, "And this time, no one will cut you off halfway." As Min exited the office, he passed by the wall of visionaries once more. He didn't look up, didn't stop, but directly beneath his photo, a small digital panel had just been installed, displaying a simple LED message. The voice you ignored helped build the system you use. The Nexinova board meeting on Wednesday morning was announced as a review of internal process and company culture. Most assumed it was a formal gesture in response to the recent commotion within the engineering department. Connor had still not returned to the office. Jenny wasn't invited, and Min, or rather Harrison Min Tran, was not on the official guest list. But Margaret knew well. No reform meeting truly begins until the one who was harmed enters the room, not the one who wrote the report. 8:59 a.m. Min stepped into the top-floor boardroom of the San Mateo headquarters. Sunlight streamed diagonally through the glass walls, hitting the sleek black chairs where 13 board members sat, executives, product heads, investment advisors, and a few remaining co-founders. Margaret stood. "The final participant for today's meeting has arrived." No one objected. Min pulled out a chair at the end of the table. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't define himself. The meeting began with a short presentation from the head of HR Culture Initiatives. "Recent events in our engineering department have highlighted fractures between our stated values and our day-to-day practices." The man continued, repeating the phrase, "We've had diversity policies in place since 2020, at least 4 times in 10 minutes. Min didn't interrupt. He simply took notes. Then Margaret rose. She didn't use slides. She said, "I'd like to yield the floor to someone who's not here to recount what went wrong, but to ask a question we've never had the courage to answer." Then she looked toward Min. The room fell utterly silent. Min stood. He brought nothing with him but a blank sheet of paper. He didn't read from it. He simply looked each person in the eye, then asked, "In the last 6 weeks, how many of you have listened, fully, to a sentence spoken by someone who didn't sound like you, without already preparing how to dismiss it?" The question wasn't loud, it wasn't accusatory, but it landed on the table with real weight. A board member, silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, shifted uncomfortably. "What exactly are you implying?" Min looked at him. "I'm asking, has anyone here ever listened, not out of pity, not because it was required to assess performance, but because you truly believe that voice deserved to be heard?" No one responded. He continued, "I'm not asking because I'm the one who got rejected for an accent. I'm asking because I once helped build a system that could interpret 142 languages and still couldn't help my own mother book a doctor's appointment because she mispronounced the word appointment, and that was my failure." Another board member spoke, "But Nexinova doesn't discriminate against anyone." Min nodded slightly. "Not on paper, but within the system, non-standard voices are tagged for manual review. Code that doesn't match a certain office tone is flagged. Candidates who don't fit the culture are filtered out before the second round." The head of product flipped through his notebook. "If there's evidence, we're open to reviewing it." Min didn't argue. He plugged in a small USB and connected it to the projector. The first slide displayed a portion of code from the voice classification module. It clearly showed, if the phrase business standard was not detected, the system labeled it as unverified. An audio recording played. A black employee's voice saying, "I'd love to contribute," was flagged. Next, an Indian employee's voice saying, "I can present this idea," was tagged, "requires review." No one could dispute the logic. because they had approved those thresholds themselves. Min turned off the display, looked at everyone. The system doesn't lie. It just reflects what we believe is normal. He paused. If you truly want to fix this, the first step isn't another policy. It's learning how to sit still and listen long enough. Margaret asked, and if they don't listen? Min gave a soft smile. Then they'll keep training systems to exclude people like me. And one day they'll be replaced by an AI that isn't fluent enough, simply because they didn't use the right keywords. The meeting ended without applause. But as Min stepped out of the room, the youngest board member, a brown-skinned man with a soft voice, followed him and whispered, I was rejected from an internship here once because my voice wasn't clear enough in the intro video. But today I'm on the board because I learned to sound like them. He paused. But after hearing you, I think, maybe I don't have to keep doing that anymore. Min nodded. Don't be like me. Be the best part of those who were never named. 1 week after the boardroom meeting, Nexanova released a short internal announcement. The executive board has approved a full-scale review of internal operations, including contribution attribution protocols, diverse language recognition training, and transparent technical evaluation. The program will be co-led by Ms. Margaret Fields and Mr. Harrison Min Tran. There were no illustrations, no flashy slogans, but the entire company knew something had just been activated, and it couldn't be turned off again. Min returned to the 6th floor office. No more Eric Wang badge, no more mispronounced names, but he still chose to sit at the same desk, in the back right corner, where he once silently watched the team. Jenny sat across from him. She smiled as he arrived. It starts today, huh? He nodded. The difference is, this time, I'm not starting alone. Margaret held the kickoff meeting on Monday in the internal event space. No raised stage, no head table, just 50 chairs arranged in a circle, each for a representative from engineering, HR, product, customer support, and even the intern groups. On every chair, a small whiteboard and a marker. She stepped into the center of the circle. No microphone, no slides. She simply said, we used to think diversity was about numbers, number of countries, genders, but no one ever asked, what is diversity if the system only accepts one kind of voice as professional? She held up her board. On it was a sentence. I was never allowed to finish my sentence. Then she said, now I invite you to write down a sentence you once thought no one wanted to hear. No one wrote at first, but then, one by one, they began. A young engineer from Bangladesh wrote, I'm not slow, I'm just translating in my head. A QA assistant wrote, I taught myself all of Python in Spanish. A veteran team lead wrote, I was afraid I'd lose my job if I defended someone who stuttered. Min stood silently observing. No one was asked to explain their sentence. No one was applauded. But that silence wasn't like the silences before. It wasn't cold. It was warm and heavy. Heavy like a new responsibility settling across a company that had spent too long avoiding what it meant to truly listen. That afternoon, they began rebuilding the entire internal system with one principle. Every line of code must be attributed, not to the person who pushed it, but to the one who first wrote it. Jenny led the team rebuilding the contribution tracking platform. They named it Traceback. The name came from a Nigerian intern, once rejected from the core team by Connor for having a voice unfit for presentations. In just 2 weeks, over 12,000 lines of code were reattributed. More than 300 commits were re-tagged with their rightful authors. A new module was introduced, Cultural Linguistic Recognition Layer, an AI feature that assessed voice clarity, intent, and context without assigning value based on accent norms. Min didn't lead any team. He didn't take a new title, but he showed up every day, reviewing documentation, listening to test recordings, sometimes just nodding. His presence, quiet but undeniable, became the axis around which the reform turned. One evening, Jenny brought him the first printed copy of Traceback. The cover was blank white, with a single line. This system remembers who spoke first. She said, I think this is the first thing I've written where I'm not afraid my name will be erased. He smiled. First time, but not the last. That weekend, Margaret entered the team room with a letter in hand. It was from a former employee, someone who had left the company the year before. The letter read, "I used to think I didn't belong here, but when I read about the new program, I realized I didn't leave because I was different. I left because the system wasn't ready for me. Thank you for making it ready now." At the bottom, the letter was signed, an accent they never forgot. Min read it, then folded it gently. He didn't need to know who wrote it, because now that voice had finally been heard, even if late. 3 weeks after the traceback system launched, the Nexanova office still looked the same. Same white desks, same glass walls, same recessed lighting, but the air inside no longer felt the same. In sprint meetings, interns' voices were no longer interrupted. In technical shareouts, code written during early-stage testing was cited, and the original author named. No need to spotlight a face. Just get the name right. In the cafeteria, the bulletin board in the corner had changed. Instead of Employee of the Week, it now read The Quiet Contributor. One name per week, a short description, and an excerpt from a product or solution they had helped build. The first week, Jenny Wu. Description: the one who rewrote the AI logic before anyone was willing to read the data properly. Week 2, Ankit Rao, a South Asian engineer once stripped of push access for unclear formatting. Week 3, Sophia Mendoza, a support assistant ignored in 5 consecutive meetings. Every name, every sentence, was the system's quiet way of saying, "I see you now." Margaret hosted a new kind of forum called The Room Without a Microphone. Each person could only speak when there was no mic, no screens, no typing. Just themselves and someone listening. The first speaker was a Vietnamese intern, hands trembling, voice low. "I used to think I had to change my name to get hired. Now I want to keep it and just learn to speak more clearly, not more American." The second was a 45-year-old Korean employee, slow but steady. "I've never spoken in big meetings because I was afraid of being called confusing. But now I'd like to speak, even if it takes me a while." No one laughed, no one rushed them. And the strange thing was, no one felt like time was wasted. In the stillness, listening was reborn. Min didn't speak that day. He sat in the back row, simply listening, like his mother once sat in the back of her community English class, not to raise her hand, but to sit close enough to the board to read every vowel. That afternoon, Jenny came to Min with a small note. "We just got an email from a former employee." Min read, "I was once told I didn't present in a professionally American way. Now I think I just needed a place willing to hear the way I truly speak. Thank you for reopening the door I thought was permanently shut." Signed at the bottom, Carlos H. The same Carlos Connor once denied a full-time offer. Jenny asked, "Do you think people like Carlos might come back?" Min was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Not all will return, but at least now they know they're not locked out just because they didn't say it the right way." That weekend, Margaret invited Min to speak at a special internal workshop titled, "How to Keep Your Voice When the System's Trained on Silence." He didn't use slides, didn't tell a personal story. He just wrote 3 questions on a whiteboard. 1. Do all people have the right to speak? 2. If so, why are only a few ways of speaking accepted? 3. If you don't understand someone, is that their fault? The room fell still. Min said, "Reform isn't a campaign, it's a new language. And the first thing you need to learn isn't a word. It's how to wait for someone to finish speaking." After that session, the company's performance feedback system was updated. Employees could now submit evaluations via voice, if they chose to, and it would be honored as equally valid as written input. The engineering team built a tool called Listen Loop, allowing teams to replay what was said during meetings, not to verify, but to listen properly if they'd cut someone off. None of these made headlines. None sent Nexanova's stock price soaring, but each email of thanks, each quiet nod, each time someone was heard all the way through, began to unlock doors that needed no keys, just someone willing to open them from the inside. One late evening, Min stood alone in the 6th-floor hallway, looking out at the city lights. Jenny approached and handed him a file. Inside, an 8-week reform summary. 76% of employees said they felt more recognized. 84% said they understood their colleagues better after using Listen Loop. And most notably, 92% chose to keep using their natural voice when speaking. Min finished reading. He said nothing, but his gaze softened, because finally what he'd been trying to preserve all along wasn't his name or a title, but the right to finish a sentence, without being edited halfway through. Monday, week 13. The 10th floor boardroom at Nexinova was lit early, as usual. Black leather chairs circled the long table, and the large screen at the front remained dark, waiting. Among the folders and water bottles sat a single cream-colored envelope, neat, precise, as if someone had spent the night aligning it just right. Handwritten in blue ink across the center, to those who were once told their voice didn't belong. No logo, no heading, no signature. But the handwriting, rounded, slightly tilted, consistent, was unmistakably Min's. Margaret entered the room at 7:48 a.m. She paused when she saw the envelope, then slowly opened it. Inside wasn't a resignation letter, nor a farewell speech, nor a list of accomplishments or proposals. Just a single white sheet. In the center, written by hand, no cross-outs, no edits, only one message. I'm not leaving because I was ignored. I'm leaving because now I know I can leave behind a silence worth listening to. Please don't fill it with voices that all sound the same. Leave that space for the next person, who will say something different in their own true voice. And when they begin to speak, don't correct. Just listen to the end. There was no sign-off, no bold print, nothing more needed. Those who once overlooked his presence would now have to face his absence as something undeniable. That morning, no one saw Min at his desk. No formal announcement. But Jenny, when she opened her laptop, saw one pinned internal message sent privately. It's time. My part is finished. Yours is just beginning. That afternoon, Margaret addressed the company. Mr. Harrison Min Tran has officially stepped down from his role as Internal Reform Coordinator. This was a personal decision. He will not be replaced. No one questioned it. No one asked, why now? Everyone understood. He didn't leave in anger. He left like someone who had completed a task, one the system didn't block with resistance, but with indifference. Later that day on the traceback system, the very platform Min and Jenny had rebuilt from forgotten data, a final commit appeared. No technical content, no performance notes, no change requests, just one line. If you ever felt you had to sound like someone else to be heard, let this line remind you. The one who built the system was once rejected for not sounding like them. Below that, one signature remained unhidden. HMT. Back on the 6th floor, Jenny entered just as a group of engineers were debating a new logic flow. She didn't interrupt. She simply raised the old nameplate, Min Tran, faded but still legible, and pinned it to the bulletin board where people used to post quick tech requests. That day, the board wasn't crowded like usual, but the space around his name wasn't filled. It became the center, and also the reminder. 3 days later, during an open forum hosted by HR, Jenny stood in the middle of a circle of 40 engineers, assistants, supervisors, even interns, and held up a blank whiteboard. No graphs, no bullet points. Just one handwritten question in blue ink. What made you feel you weren't allowed to finish your sentence? She didn't ask for answers, but one by one, they wrote theirs, willingly, and posted them to the back wall. The wall that once displayed polished faces and curated resumes now had a new name, the Wall of Unfinished Sentences. The first card came from a Filipino QA staffer. I thought I wasn't smart enough because every time I mispronounced a word, they cut me off. Another, a black former intern, wrote, I speak slowly not because I lack ideas, but because I'm translating in both directions. One more, from a part-time janitor, was printed in shaky italics. No one ever asked me. Each sentence, no edits, no comments, no mockery. No one had to prove they were clear, fluent, or worthy. And strangely, in that room, no one felt sad. No one felt burdened. Only silence, quiet as if every sound had returned to its original purpose, to be heard, not judged. That night, Margaret texted Jenny, I've never heard this office so quiet, not from lack of sound, but because people are truly listening.
Jenny replied, maybe because for the first time, they're not afraid of being misunderstood. Margaret added, And I am finally convinced this system didn't need more rules. It needed more pauses. At the end of the week, Nexanova's internal inbox received an anonymous message. No attachment, no subject line. Just a quote. Some voices go unheard, not because they're unclear, but because the system hasn't learned to recognize their sound. But once you've heard it enough, you can't unhear it. And after that, you have no excuse to pretend deafness. At the end of the note was a scanned signature, handwritten in black ink. My mother used to tell me, speaking slowly isn't wrong. Speaking differently isn't worse. It just means the listener isn't used to it yet. Now I believe her. No one verified if the email was really from Min, but no one needed to, because the story had already etched itself into how people spoke from that day forward. Through patience, through silence, through letting others finish, even if the voice wasn't standard. When the old wall of honor was eventually taken down to make room for shared space, only one plaque was kept. Your voice doesn't have to sound like theirs to have value. And beneath it, engraved in wood, in smaller letters, listen to the end. If you've ever been cut off halfway, if you've ever had to change how you speak just to be heard, or if you've ever dismissed someone simply because their voice didn't sound like yours, then maybe this story wasn't just about a CEO. Maybe it was about us. Because some revolutions don't need noise. They only need you to listen all the way through. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Click like to help spread the change that begins with respect. Hit subscribe to follow more journeys that retell truths we've forgotten. Drop a comment. Have you ever been judged by the way you spoke, or didn't? Share this video if you believe a fair system must be brave enough to hear what it's not used to. Thank you for listening to the end.